Welcome to the 2025 end of year review. 2025 has been an absolutely insane year for me. I made a friend. I finally felt the meaning of the word empathy. I totaled out 2 cars. I lost a friend. I'll have to double check my notes. One moment. At this rate, you'd think I'd been scammed for $10,000. But as my notes indicate, it wasn't all bad. I got to go to Guatemala for a week. It was my first time leaving the country. I turned 21, and like every 21-year-old, I started the year out with 0 guns and ended it with 2, a revolver and a long rifle in the form of an AR pistol. Next year, maybe we get the Benelli M4. I got a pretty neat 4-cylinder, 6-speed, manual transmission, mid-mileage 04 Toyota Matrix with the XRS package. It was a great year for me. Despite everything, it was very neat to kind of, live life almost with less stress. I spent most of it driving an hour each way to work for a boss that yelled at me and gave me the same amount of stress that I hadn't felt in many years. But it made me realize I didn't enjoy being yelled at anymore. And that helped force me to work hard enough at the things that I needed to change to not be yelled at. Leaving the country was really cool because I had spent my entire life exclusively in Portland, Oregon, no association. And so it was cool to not just leave that environment, which I'd been out of for the past 2 to 3 years, but leave the U.S. in its entirety and go somewhere where the houses not only did not have baseboards, but emulated that of a non-weatherized shack. The only thing that carried over culturally was exclusively the bed. Their beds even had bed frames. Their beds, to some degree, were nicer than my bed. They had nice blankets and a proper bed frame. The only reason I have a bed frame is so I can fit more crud underneath the bed. Yeah, my notes have nothing else left in them detail-wise, but we'll kind of move on to the more serious things. What I can expect out of the year to come. I am still habitually plagued by stereotypical sin. So it is, of the utmost importance, as Daniel has impressed upon me, that I learn to weld. And also that I eradicate this variable which has plagued me loosely, to the best of my knowledge, since I was 14, out of my life. But that and the YouTube Shorts are kind of the only, variables that I know of that are habitual failures. I'm working on improving my capacity to process emotions, which is very new to me. I'm very, very familiar with emotional regulation and disassociation. Those are phenomenal tools with excellent silver linings, and I encourage especially the mentally soft to learn how to properly employ those. However, especially as a man, and I think John Lovell, Warrior Poet Society, and John Deloney are phenomenal examples of how valuable it is to you as a man to be able to process, which is completely separate and utterly devoid of regulation, to process your emotions. But yeah, it's been an absolute banger of a year, and I'm looking forward to 2026 quite a bit. I'm curious to see how much money I made. I don't know yet. I never really know until I file my W-2s. It'll be really cool to see, the stereotype that everybody measures off of is like 50 grand. I anticipate surpassing that this year. I didn't quite surpass it the previous year. I was close, but no cigar. This year I expect it'll be interesting. It depends on how much overtime. I was working quite a lot of overtime last year, and I got quite close to it. So I might actually fall even more short of it this year if I get less overtime. But that's the golden number that everybody goes off of, because allegedly you're supposed to be able to certainly purchase a house, which I have no intention of doing, but I'll be shoving all of that into retirement. Shoving all of it into retirement. The Roth IRA maxes out at 20 grand a year. If you aren't maxing out your Roth IRA, what are you even doing? And the correct answer to that is buying guns and ammo. I got the guns part down. We're working on the ammo part. We could use better guns and more guns and better accessories for the guns. But, it's important to be a good steward of the Lord's resources. Speaking of which, I owe the church 10% in back taxes, so we're working on catching that up. But, I'm caught up with the IRS, and the church won't throw you in jail if you're slow paying them, so, it balances out. Legos, dude, we're getting into Legos. We got some phenomenal Lego deals. I'm working on Phase 1 Rex. There's 2 different ones. I like both of them, but they're about $100 each. You can get a $5, at least according to Bricklink, Phase 2 Rex. We're going to collect both of them. I would like to go back to Oregon to pick up my Cad Bane, which is worth like $25-ish, $20 to $30. And my $15 to $20 Ahsoka, and generally Anakin goes for about $10, and then I need to outright purchase a $10 Kenobi, the Skywalker version, to go with it. Right now I have the Coruscant gunship, but I prefer the 7676 gunship. I have one ATTE in the box. I have one ATTE to go with my Coruscant gunship, pre-built. Bought it in a box for $80. Best darn thing I ever bought. I also got the Republic tank, but anybody who's seen Star Wars Clone Wars has no idea what I'm talking about, because only the Separatists had a tank. I have no figurines as of right now, and then I have the 7.5 series AT-AT Walker, which I'm going to try to trade for Commander Wolf, Commander Cody, both Phase 1, and if I can get Commander Rex in on that deal as well, that'd be phenomenal. Because on Bricklink, this set's worth about $200, and those figurines altogether are worth $230, so it'll be a very tough sell. But, maybe if you swap out Wolf and just go with Rex, Cody, a couple 212 troopers, and maybe some Phase or some 501st troopers, you might be able to figure it out. But that's, on the Lego scene, is what it is. I don't know if I'm missing anything. I think mentally, I do these videos mainly to document where I'm at, but also to show my children one day what it was like when I was this age, because I have no clue what my father was like when he was this age. I only really began to know him when he was like 40, and now he's 50. So I guess maybe I apparently allegedly knew him like late 30s. but he always, even over the 10 years, like the only change I saw in him was the energy. You get older and you get a little bit more burned out. And I fight that burnout in myself. It's very different. Like the difference between 20 and 30-year-olds, it's not just maturity. You watch the spark in their soul go out. And I understand why. My life would be much easier if I let that spark, the chaotic energy, kind of die out a little bit. I'd be more functional, I'd be more normal. And I'd do a little bit less, because generally my life, in terms of the common issues that I run into personally, is I will do something stupid that makes sense to me, either because I didn't think about it long enough, or I didn't think about it in the right ways, and I'll get in some amount of trouble for it. And the reason that I'm not able to think about it in the right ways is several different things. I never developed common sense properly. And I don't know exactly what common sense is, but to me, it's the capacity to see an obvious solution to a very simple problem. And I feel like, at least for me personally, the reason I do not see the common solution to the simple problem very often, if even ever, is purely because when I'm even fortunate enough to notice it, that there is even a problem with what I'm doing, you feel a little bit off emotionally, but because I had taught myself to think purely logically, you get like a little bit of weirdness in the middle of your stomach or whatever, if you're lucky, and then I just sit there and think about it logically and come to the conclusion that I want to, that will allow me to rationalize my position, to do what I want to do, rather than to see it objectively. And I'm trying to shift that and think, right, because what many people like me in my position fail to realize is your emotions are signals that you need to listen to. And the way you listen to them is you go, oh, something feels off. And you ask yourself the question, why does something feel off? What is going on that is causing me to feel off? And you think about the different reasons why you feel off, and you don't... The trick is to treat the problem at hand and measure it up against the feelings, and the goal is to come to a conclusion that is congruent with the feelings, rather than try to rationalize why you shouldn't feel the way that you do about it, if that makes any sense. And I'm sure all of the emotionally competent people will be like, how does the word congruent factor into emotions whatsoever? But I'm not really talking to those people. I'm talking to the people like myself that are just varying degrees of, in some cases, blatantly autistic. But I'm, high-functioning autistic. And unformally diagnosed. Because, like most autists, I don't want to give the government an extra excuse to take my guns. But, I say that mostly in jest. That said, 2026... here I come.